My sister's affair destroyed my marriage 7 years ago. Now her new fiancé wants me to forgive her. I never thought I'd be telling this story again, but here I am. My name is Rachel, and 7 years ago, my life changed forever when my sister Emma betrayed me in the worst possible way. I was married to David at the time, and we had what I thought was a perfect life. We lived in a beautiful colonial-style house in the suburbs, both had good jobs, and were talking about starting a family. Emma was always around, which I loved because we'd been close since childhood. She was going through a rough patch after losing her job, so I even suggested she stay with us temporarily while she got back on her feet. What a fool I was. Looking back, there were signs I chose to ignore. The lingering glances between them during family dinners, the way they'd both suddenly need to run errands at the same time, how Emma would dress up more than usual even for casual family gatherings. I dismissed it all because who would ever think their own sister would do something so heinous? The day I caught them is burned into my memory like a brand. It was a Wednesday afternoon, I remember because I'd taken a half-day off work to prepare for our anniversary dinner the following weekend. I walked into our bedroom, and there they were, in my bed, the bed David and I had picked out together when we first got married. The sheets were the ones Emma had given us as a Christmas present the year before, which now seemed like some sort of sick joke. I stood there, frozen, as they scrambled to cover themselves. Emma started crying immediately, saying, "Rachel, I'm so sorry," over and over like a broken record. David just sat there, silent, looking more annoyed at being caught than ashamed of what he'd done. That's what got to me the most. He didn't even try to explain or apologize. He just looked at me like I was interrupting something important. I remember screaming at them to get out. I threw whatever I could grab: books, shoes, picture frames. One frame hit David in the shoulder, and the glass shattered. It was our wedding photo. The symbolism wasn't lost on me, even in my rage. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers, paperwork, and crying. I learned they'd been seeing each other for months. 6 months, to be exact. 6 months of family dinners where they'd sat across from me, knowing what they were doing. 6 months of Emma borrowing my clothes, using my shower, eating the meals I cooked, all while sleeping with my husband. I immediately filed for divorce. David didn't contest it, he was too busy playing house with my sister. They moved in together before the ink was even dry on our divorce papers. The betrayal was like a physical pain in my chest, something that made it hard to breathe whenever I thought about it. Emma tried to reach out almost immediately. The first time was through a text message, just 2 weeks after I caught them. "Please, Rachel, let me explain. I never meant for this to happen." I blocked her number. The second attempt came through our mother. Mom showed up at my new apartment with Emma's handwritten letter, 12 pages long, detailing how sorry she was, how she'd fallen in love with David despite trying not to, how she hoped I could find it in my heart to forgive her. I burned the letter in my kitchen sink while Mom watched, horrified. The third time was at our cousin Sarah's wedding, 3 months after everything happened. Emma tried to corner me in the bathroom, her eyes red from crying, begging me to just hear her out. I walked past her like she was invisible. Sarah later told me she understood why I left the reception early, but I could tell she thought I was being dramatic. The fourth attempt came when she found out she was pregnant. She showed up at my workplace, her hand on her barely showing belly, causing a scene in the lobby. "You're going to be an aunt," she said, like it was some kind of peace offering. I had security escort her out and change jobs the following month. The fifth time was when David cheated on her too. Karma, as they say, is a witch. She was 7 months pregnant when she caught him with his dental hygienist. The irony might have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. She ended up homeless because she quit her job to move in with him, and he kicked her out. She came to my apartment, suitcase in hand, crying about how I was right about him, how she should have listened to me, how sorry she was for everything. I shut the door in her face. Our parents took her in, of course. They were disgusted with what she'd done, but she was still their daughter, and she was pregnant with their grandchild. I told them I wouldn't visit while she was there. Mom cried, Dad looked disappointed, but I stood firm. I wouldn't be in the same room as her. For 7 years, I maintained that boundary. I missed family Christmases, Thanksgivings, birthday celebrations. I saw my parents only when they came to visit me, and I made it clear that Emma and her child were not to be mentioned. They respected that, mostly. Sometimes Mom would slip and start to say something about my niece, Hannah, I learned her name was, but would catch herself mid-sentence. I built a new life for myself. I threw myself into my career, got promoted twice, bought my own house. I dated occasionally but nothing serious. The betrayal had left me with trust issues that therapy was slowly helping me work through. I made new friends, ones who didn't know Emma or David, ones who didn't look at me with pity or judgment. Then, 2 weeks ago, this guy named Michael reached out to me. He found me on social media, sent me a message saying he was Emma's fiancé and wanted to talk. Apparently, my parents had hosted a dinner to meet him officially, and my absence had been noticed. Emma had fed him some story about how I was still bitter about her dating my ex, making it sound like they got together after my divorce. His message was full of self-righteous indignation. Family should come first, he wrote. Everyone makes mistakes, and 7 years is a long time to hold on to anger. He actually had the nerve to say I was being childish for not attending family functions because my sister dated my ex. I couldn't let that stand. I wrote back, explaining in detail exactly what had happened. How I'd found them in my marital bed. How Emma had been living in my house, eating my food, borrowing my clothes while sleeping with my husband. How she'd helped destroy my marriage and then had the audacity to expect forgiveness. I told him everything, not to hurt Emma, though I won't pretend that wasn't a bonus, but because he deserved to know who he was planning to marry. He didn't respond, but I heard through the grapevine that he'd broken off the engagement immediately. Emma had apparently tried to explain, to justify it somehow, but he wasn't having it. Mom told me he'd said something about not being able to trust someone who could betray their own sister that way. Then yesterday, Emma showed up at my door. 7 years older but still recognizable, though her face was harder now, lined with the stress of single motherhood and failed relationships. She was furious, screaming about how I'd ruined her chance at happiness, how I should be willing to put the past behind us and reconcile. She said I acted like she repulsed me. Because you do, I told her, and I meant it. Looking at her still made my stomach turn, even after all these years. She started crying then, pulling out the emotional manipulation she'd always been so good at. One of us could die, she sobbed, and we'd never reconcile if you're not willing to try. I looked her straight in the eye and said, I would not care. You could die tomorrow, and I would not regret my decision not to reconcile. She left in tears, probably running straight to our parents to play the victim again. But this time, they were on my side. They called me later that evening, furious that she'd confronted me. They said her lies to Michael and her reaction to being exposed showed she hadn't changed at all in 7 years. Our Aunt Catherine disagrees. She called me this morning to lecture me about forgiveness and family bonds. She said I was being crueler than Emma had been, that saying I wouldn't care if my own sister died was evil. She doesn't understand that Emma stopped being my sister the day she chose to betray me in the worst possible way. Some people say time heals all wounds, but they're wrong. Some betrayals cut too deep, leave scars that never fade. Emma made her choice 7 years ago, and now she's living with the consequences. She chose my husband over her sister, chose betrayal over loyalty, and now she's alone. David moved on to his 4th girlfriend since their split. My parents are disappointed in her, her fiancé left her, and her daughter will grow up knowing her mother is someone who can't be trusted. As for me, I'm doing fine. My life is peaceful without her in it. I have my career, my friends, my hobbies. I've learned to be happy on my own terms, without the constant drama Emma always brought into my life. Some might call it cruel or unforgiving, but I call it self-preservation. The funny thing is, I did get tested for STDs after finding out about their affair. All negative, thankfully, but David never denied there might have been others besides Emma. I wonder if she ever got tested, or if she just trusted him blindly like I once did. Last week, Mom asked me if I'd ever consider meeting Hannah, my niece. She's 6 now, apparently smart as a whip and looks just like Emma did at that age. I told Mom no. It's not the child's fault, of course, but I can't separate her from what her parents did. Maybe that makes me a terrible person, but I'd rather be terrible than pretend everything is okay. Emma will probably try to reconcile again. It's her pattern, wait until things settle down, then make another attempt. She'll probably use Hannah as leverage next time, try to guilt me about depriving my niece of an aunt. Or maybe she'll wait until one of our parents gets sick, use that as emotional ammunition. But my answer will be the same as it's been for the past 7 years: no. Some might say I'm stuck in the past, that I should move on and forgive. But they don't understand that forgiveness isn't always the answer. Sometimes, the only way to heal is to cut out the poison completely, even if that poison shares your blood. So here I am, 7 years later, still standing by my decision. Emma can cry, plead, or send flying monkeys to guilt me, it won't change anything. She made her choice, and I made mine. That's the thing about choices, they have consequences, and sometimes those consequences last a lifetime. I don't wish her ill anymore, I don't wish her anything at all. She's just someone I used to know, someone who taught me a valuable lesson about trust and betrayal. And if that makes me cruel or unforgiving in some people's eyes, well, I can live with that. I've been living with it for 7 years, and I'll keep living with it for as long as it takes. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about forgiveness or family or moving on. It's about respect, self-respect. And I respect myself too much to let someone who betrayed me so completely back into my life, sister or not. They say blood is thicker than water, but they never mention how easily it can be poisoned. Emma poisoned our blood the day she chose David over me, and no amount of time or tears will ever make that right. Some bridges, once burned, should stay ashes.